Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to get into something I think a lot of us struggle with. How to get employees to actually follow those sometimes pesky company policies.
It can definitely be a challenge.
Right, it's like they're there for a reason.
Absolutely.
But then you see people cutting corners or just like completely ignoring the rules.
It's definitely a common problem.
Like that time I caught a coworker watching a cooking show
Uh-oh.
on their work computer
No way.
during a mandatory cybersecurity training.
Oh, the irony. Yeah, employee compliance, it's crucial but often tricky.
For sure.
But the good news is we've got some research here with 10 practical strategies. And they go beyond just, telling people what to do.
Okay, I like the sound of that because sometimes it feels like you're just banging your head against a wall.
Right.
So let's dive in. What are these 10 strategies?
Well, the first one really focuses on education and training. But it's not just about those boring annual PowerPoint presentations.
Thank goodness.
Right. It's more about regular, engaging training that's actually tailored to different roles and departments.
Okay, so like making it relevant to what people actually do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about cybersecurity training. It can be super effective in reducing phishing attacks, but it has to be engaging.
That makes sense.
Some studies show that interactive training can decrease successful phishing attempts by 80%.
80%.
Yeah, it's a huge impact.
So it's really about giving people the knowledge and skills to make smart decisions, not just checking a box.
Absolutely.
What's next?
All right, so the next strategy is all about making policies easy to understand. We've all seen those company policies that are just pages and pages of legal jargon, right?
Oh, yeah, totally.
This research emphasizes clear, concise language, bullet points, visuals, diagrams, anything to make it easier to digest.
Okay, I like that. Visuals are always helpful.
Right, so imagine an acceptable use policy, but with clear examples, so everyone knows what they can and can't do.
Makes sense. So you don't have to decipher some ancient scroll to figure out the rules.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so we've got training and clear policies. What else?
Well, this is where technology comes in. Strategy number 3 is leverage technology to automate compliance monitoring.
Ooh, sounds fancy.
It is. Basically, it's about using tools that can track employee actions and flag potential issues early on.
Okay, so it's not about being Big Brother. It's about having, a safety net.
Exactly. Catching things before they become big problems.
Gotcha. Could you give me an example of what that would look like in practice?
Sure. Let's say you store company policies in SharePoint, right? There's this tool called DocRead. It integrates with SharePoint and can track who's read each policy.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it can send automatic reminders, generate reports, all that.
So you don't have to chase everyone down to make sure they've read the policies.
Exactly. It's like a virtual assistant for compliance.
I love that. All right, technology for the win. What's next?
The next strategy is about creating a culture of accountability.
Okay, that sounds important, but also kind of vague. How do you actually do that?
Yeah. It's a good point. It's definitely not just about putting up a poster that says we value accountability. It starts with leadership. When leaders consistently follow the rules themselves, it sets the tone for everyone else.
Right, lead by example.
Exactly. Managers also play a key role. They need to be actively promoting compliance, addressing issues quickly, and making sure their teams understand the policies.
Okay, so everyone's involved, not just leadership.
Right. It's also important to create an environment where people feel safe speaking up if they see something wrong.
That's huge. If people are afraid to say something, problems can slip through the cracks.
Absolutely. So leadership buy-in, managers on board, and employees who feel comfortable raising concerns. Those are the ingredients.
Got it. So what else do we need to really make this culture of accountability stick?
Well, sometimes you need a little bit of structure, which leads us to strategy number 5. Use clear consequences for noncompliance.
Ooh, okay, so this is where we get a little more direct.
It is. No one likes to talk about punishment, but consequences are a necessary part of any effective compliance program.
I guess that makes sense. But we're not talking about, public shaming or anything, right?
No, not at all. It's about setting clear expectations and making sure people understand there are repercussions for breaking the rules.
So what kind of consequences are we talking about?
It really depends on the severity of the violation. Could be something like additional training, a verbal warning, or a written reprimand. In more serious cases, it might involve suspension or even termination.
Okay, so it's a graduated system.
Exactly. The key is to be fair, proportional, and consistent.
Like forgetting to log out of your computer might get a reminder, But repeatedly ignoring data privacy protocols could lead to something more serious.
Exactly. It's about protecting the organization.
Right. It's about sending a message that compliance is taken seriously. Okay, on to strategy number 6, which sounds a bit more technical. Implement role-based access control.
Yeah, RBAC. It sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. It's about making sure people only have access to the information they need to do their jobs.
So like a digital bouncer,
Yeah.
making sure everyone stays in their designated areas.
Exactly. By limiting access based on job function, you're reducing the risk of unauthorized access or accidental data breaches.
It's like compartmentalizing information to minimize risk. Makes sense from a security standpoint, but probably a headache to actually set up.
It can be, but there are tools and technologies that can help. And the benefits outweigh the challenges. It not only reduces risk, but also helps employees work more efficiently.
Because they're not overwhelmed with information they don't need.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm seeing a pattern here. A lot of these strategies are about making it easier for employees to do the right thing. It's not just about relying on them to always make perfect decisions.
You're spot on. It's about setting people up for success. And that brings us to our next strategy. Regularly review and update policies.
Policies, ugh. Okay, I get it, but it can feel like such a chore.
I hear you, but things change, regulations change, so policies need to keep up.
Makes sense. How often are we talking about? Like once a year?
At least annually, yeah. It's about making sure your policies are still relevant and aligned with current standards.
It's like giving your policies a checkup.
Exactly. It helps avoid confusion and unintentional violations. Trying to navigate today's world with outdated policies is like using a map from the 1950s to get around.
You'd be totally lost.
Exactly. It also shows your employees that you take compliance seriously.
Makes sense. All right, on to strategy number 8. And this one sounds a bit more fun. Create incentives for compliance. Okay, tell me more. I like incentives.
Well, who doesn't, right? The research shows that incentives can be really powerful for boosting compliance.
I mean, it makes sense. If you know there's a reward for following the rules, you're more likely to make the effort.
Right. It aligns people's self-interest with the organization's goals.
So what kind of incentives are we talking about? Bonuses, extra vacation days?
It could be any of those things. The key is to make it meaningful to your employees. Public recognition, gift cards, maybe even a small bonus. You could even create a compliance leaderboard and encourage some friendly competition.
Ooh, I like that idea. A little healthy competition.
Yeah.
Okay, we're down to the last 2 strategies. What's next?
The next one emphasizes communication. Provide feedback mechanisms. It's about creating ways for employees to share their thoughts and suggestions about the compliance program.
I'm all for open communication, but how do you make sure people actually feel comfortable speaking up?
That's a good question. Psychological safety is key. You could use anonymous surveys or hold dedicated Q&A sessions where people can ask questions without fear of being identified.
I like that. It creates a safe space for people to share concerns or offer suggestions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's about continuous improvement, right? It's not just about finding problems. It's about getting feedback on what's working well, too.
All right, so you're constantly evolving and improving the program. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
On to our final strategy, and this one sounds kind of intimidating. Conduct regular compliance audits. Are we talking surprise inspections and a team of auditors descending on the office?
No, not quite. Think of compliance audits as a checkup,
Okay,
a way to assess the health of your program.
gotcha.
It's about identifying potential issues before they become big problems.
So it's like a routine inspection to make sure everything's running smoothly.
Exactly. You can start small, focusing on specific areas of compliance that are important to your organization, like data security or financial regulations.
Okay, so you tailor the audit to your needs.
Yeah.
How often should you do these audits?
The frequency depends on several factors. Your industry, regulations, the maturity of your compliance program. Some do them annually, others more frequently.
So it's about finding the right balance.
Right. You don't want to create a culture of fear and anxiety.
It's about finding a balance between accountability and trust. We want people to feel supported, not like they're constantly being watched.
Absolutely. And remember, the goal isn't to catch people doing something wrong. It's about identifying gaps, strengthening weaknesses, and continuously improving.
It's about making things better for everyone.
Exactly.
Okay, we've covered a lot. 10 strategies, each one offering a different way to approach this whole employee compliance challenge.
It's a pretty comprehensive list, and it's not about just checking boxes.
Right. It feels like it's more about a mindset shift than anything else.
It is. These strategies work best together as part of a bigger picture.
So it's not about just enforcing the rules, it's about creating a culture where compliance is just part of how you do business.
Exactly. It's about making doing the right thing the easy thing.
Well said. And speaking of doing the right thing,
It does sound like a bit of a cultural shift.
it does. And speaking of cultural shifts, that reminds me of the next strategy on our list. Provide feedback mechanisms. This one feels like a natural extension of what we were just talking about, creating that open dialogue around compliance.
It is. It is. It's all about giving employees a voice and making them feel like they're part of the solution. Think about it. Employees are often the ones who are closest to the action. They see the policies in action, day in and day out. They know what's working, what's not, and where there might be room for improvement.
It's like crowdsourcing compliance. But how do you make sure that feedback is actually heard and acted upon? We've all been in situations where we've given feedback and it just disappears into a black hole.
Yeah, that's a valid concern, and that's why it's so important to be intentional about how you gather and respond to feedback. The research suggests a few different approaches. Anonymous surveys, those are a great way to get honest feedback without putting people on the spot. You can ask specific questions about particular policies, training programs, or even the overall compliance culture.
Anonymity is great for encouraging honest feedback, but wouldn't it also make it harder to address specific concerns if you don't know who raised them?
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's why it's important to balance anonymity with other avenues for feedback. For example, you could also hold open Q&A sessions or town hall meetings specifically focused on compliance. This gives employees a chance to voice their concerns or suggestions directly to leadership.
I love that idea. It creates that direct line of communication and allows for a more dynamic exchange of ideas. It's not just about collecting feedback, it's about having a conversation.
Exactly. And it's about demonstrating that you're actually listening and willing to take action based on the feedback you receive.
Right, it's about closing the loop. Okay, on to our next strategy. And this one is all about positive reinforcement. I'm talking about create incentives for compliance. Who doesn't love a little reward for doing the right thing?
It's human nature. We all respond well to a little bit of encouragement. And when it comes to compliance, incentives can be a powerful motivator.
Okay, I'm sold on the idea, but let's get specific. What kind of incentives actually work? What motivates people to go above and beyond when it comes to compliance?
It really depends on your organizational culture and what your employees value. You could offer something as simple as public recognition. During team meetings, a shout out from a manager or leader can go a long way in making people feel appreciated and valued.
Yeah, a little bit of praise can be incredibly motivating. What about something a bit more tangible?
You could consider offering small rewards like gift cards, extra vacation time, or even a bonus added to their paycheck. You could even have a Compliance Champion Award each quarter, or a Compliance Hall of Fame where you showcase the top performers.
I love that. It's about making compliance fun and engaging. It's not just about avoiding negative consequences. It's about striving for positive recognition. Okay, 2 more strategies to go. What's next on our list?
Our penultimate strategy is one we've touched on before, but it's worth revisiting in more detail. It's conduct regular compliance audits. I know. The word audit can strike fear into the hearts of even the most well-intentioned employees, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, you're right. Audits often get a bad rap. But if we reframe them as a checkup, a way to assess the health of our compliance program and identify areas for improvement, they start to sound a lot less scary. It's like going to the doctor for a routine physical. You might not be thrilled about it, but you know it's good for you in the long run.
Exactly. And just like with a physical, you can tailor the scope of the audit to fit your specific needs and risk profile. You don't have to audit everything all at once. You can start small by focusing on specific areas that are particularly important to your organization, like data security or financial regulations.
Okay, that makes it feel less overwhelming. But how often should these audits be conducted? Is there a magic number?
The frequency will depend on factors like your industry, regulatory requirements, and the overall maturity of your compliance program. Some organizations might conduct audits annually, while others might need to do them more frequently. It's about finding the right balance between being thorough and not overwhelming your team with audits. You don't want to create a culture of fear and anxiety.
Yeah, it's about striking that balance between accountability and trust. We want people to feel like they're being supported, not scrutinized. Okay, we've arrived at our final strategy: regularly review and update policies. This one might seem a bit obvious, but I have a feeling it's often overlooked. We set our policies, and then we just assume they're good to go forever, right?
It's tempting to do that. But the reality is the world is constantly changing. New technologies emerge, regulations evolve, and our policies need to keep pace. It's like driving a car with an outdated GPS system. You might eventually get to your destination, but you'll probably encounter a lot of detours and wrong turns along the way.
That's a great analogy. So how often should we be reviewing and updating our policies? Is there a recommended time frame?
Annual reviews are a good starting point. It gives you a chance to take a step back, assess the current landscape, and make sure your policies are still relevant and effective. And don't be afraid to involve subject matter experts in the process. Get input from legal, compliance, HR, or anyone else who has a stake in the policies.
It's like having a team of expert navigators helping you keep your compliant GPS up to date. And I imagine it's also important to make sure employees are aware of any changes to the policies.
Absolutely. Communication is key. Whenever you update a policy, make sure you clearly communicate the changes to your employees. Explain the rationale behind the updates and how it impacts their work, and make sure the policies are accessible and easy to find. Don't bury them in some obscure corner of the company intranet.
It's about making compliance as user-friendly as possible. We want people to feel like they have the information they need to make good decisions.
Exactly. And when employees feel informed and empowered, they're more likely to be engaged and committed to compliance. It's a win-win for everyone involved. So there you have it, 10 strategies for boosting employee compliance. It's a pretty comprehensive list, covering everything from training and communication to technology and incentives. But it's important to remember that these strategies aren't isolated tactics. They work best when they're integrated into a holistic compliance program that's tailored to your specific organizational needs and culture.
It's not about checking boxes. It's about creating a culture where compliance is embedded in everything you do. It's about making doing the right thing the easy thing.
Well said. And that brings us to our final thoughts.
So we've explored these 10 strategies, but it feels like there's a bigger picture here, right? Like we've talked about getting employees to comply, but how do we move beyond just rules and create a culture where people actually want to comply?
That's the golden question. It's the difference between compliance being a burden and something people see as beneficial, even protective.
Exactly. I remember at a previous job I had, the policies felt so arbitrary, like they were just creating extra work for everyone.
Yeah.
No wonder people tried to find ways around them.
It makes sense. If policies don't seem to have a purpose, they just become obstacles. The research actually highlights a few things to make that shift. First, involve employees in the process. Don't just, hand down policies from the top.
Right.
Get their input, especially those on the front lines who actually deal with these policies every day.
Okay, so involve the people who are actually using them.
Right.
But wouldn't that make creating policies a lot more complex and time-consuming?
It can, but the payoff is worth it.
Yeah.
You're not just getting compliance, you're getting buy-in, a sense of ownership.
I see.
Plus, employees often have really valuable insights that those higher-ups might miss.
It's like they're the ones who actually know how things work on the ground.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm convinced. What else can we do to make policies, more appealing?
Clarity is key. Ditch the legalese and jargon. Use plain language, bullet points, maybe even visuals. Just make it easy to understand. And don't be afraid to add a little personality. No one wants to read a boring, dry policy document.
Right. It's like those ingredient lists on food packages. Some of them are so dense and technical, I just give up. But when they're clear and simple, I actually understand what's in the food.
Exactly. You want employees to engage with policies, not be intimidated by them.
That makes sense.
And remember, policies are living documents. You need to regularly review and update them to keep them relevant.
So they reflect the reality of the workplace.
Exactly.
Okay.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought.
Okay.
Compliance is, at its core, about ethics and integrity.
Mm-hmm.
It's about doing the right thing, even when no one's watching.
I love that. It's not just about avoiding getting in trouble. It's about building trust, creating an environment where everyone feels safe and respected.
Exactly. When you view compliance through that lens, it becomes much more than just a set of rules.
It becomes a foundation for an ethical, successful organization. Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into employee compliance. I feel like we've uncovered some really practical advice for creating a more compliant and ethical workplace.
My pleasure. It's been a great conversation.
And a big thank you to our sponsor, Doc Reed for Office 365, for supporting this episode. If you're looking for a way to simplify policy management and make compliance easier, check them out. Thanks for listening, everyone.